पीयूष शर्मा जी कह रहे हैं कि साहब ये खालिस्तानी सिंगर क्यों भारत आते रहते हैं, ये खालिस्तान को सपोर्ट करते हैं। और एक मिनट, एंड दे हैव कनेक्शंस विद पाकिस्तान, इनको रोक क्यों नहीं रहे। पीयूष शर्मा जी बिल्कुल बात ठीक है आपकी, इनको रोकना पड़ेगा, इनको रोकना चाहिए, इनको पकड़ के जेल में डालना चाहिए, इनके करियर बर्बाद करने चाहिए, इनको यूट्यूब से ब्लॉक करना चाहिए, इनके जो भी शोज हैं वो कैंसिल हो जाने चाहिए। और अगर मेरा बस चले, जो डिक्लेयर हो जाए कि ये सिंगर खालिस्तानी है और इसका शो अगर लंदन में या कहीं और हो रहा है तो इनकी शोज को डिसरप्ट भी करना चाहिए, इनके ऊपर केस फाइल करने चाहिए। ठीक है, केस के बाद ये 5 साल के बाद इनोसेंट डिक्लेयर हो जाए या गिल्टी डिक्लेयर हो जाए, उस समय कोई मतलब नहीं है। बात यह है कि ये जो भारत के खिलाफ कर रहे हैं, मुझे एक बात ये समझ में नहीं आ रही कि लोग इनके पीछे क्यों नहीं पड़ रहे। अगर मैं किसी भी पोजीशन ऑफ पावर में हूं तो सबसे पहले मैं ये देखूं कि इनके पेन पॉइंट्स क्या हैं। इनके पेन पॉइंट्स क्या हैं? ये कनाडा में रह रहे हैं, कोई बात नहीं, इट डज नॉट मैटर। इनको सुनने वाले तो इंडिया में हैं, आप इनको और इनके सुनने वालों के बीच में ब्लॉकेज डाल दो। स्पॉटिफाई को बोलो भारत में इनका गाना नहीं चलेगा, यूट्यूब से इनको ब्लॉक करवाओ, इनके ट्विटर हैंडल भारत में, इनको भारत से काट दो, हर लिहाज से, पैसे के लिहाज से, हर लिहाज से इनको काट दो, ये अपने आप मुरझा जाएंगे। क्योंकि जिस लैंग्वेज में ये गाते हैं तो इंडिया में समझ में आती, गोरा तो समझता नहीं है ना, गोरे को इंटरेस्ट है। इनका सबसे बड़ा मार्केट इंडिया है, कनाडा नहीं है इनका सबसे बड़ा मार्केट इनका इंडिया है। सूर्यान सिंह कहता है, इवन सूर्यान सिंह जी नमस्कार, नमस्कार, सॉरी, सूर्यान सिंह जी कहते हैं कि ट्रंप कहता है, ट्रंप डज नॉट लाइक ट्रूडो and the right wingers in Canada hate Khalistanis. They hate Trudeau also for decriminalizing crack, heroin and meth. And Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre grills him in parliament. भाई मुझे कभी इसका नाम प्रोनाउंस करना नहीं आया, Pierre Poilievre, Pierre Poilievre। हाँ, बोलता बड़ा अच्छा है ये, बोलता बड़ा अच्छा है Pierre Poilievre। इसको मैंने देखा, nobody likes Trudeau actually except for the Khalistanis. And I hope that Pierre Poilievre and the right wingers come to power in Canada. और मैं कह भी चुका हूं कि इंडिया शुड फंड देयर इलेक्शंस, इंडिया उनको दे दे इलेक्शंस, राइट विंगर्स को बिल्कुल पैसा, बोलो कितना पैसा चाहिए, इतना पैसा दे दीजिए कि दे कैन विन इलेक्शंस एंड देन हैमर द लाइफ आउट ऑफ खालिस्तानीज। और फिर वही रूल लाइए जो यूके ने करा है, रवांडा टाइप का। ठीक है, एक्सेप्ट इनको कोंगो भेजना, सारे खालिस्तानियों को प्लेन में भर भर के कोंगो। नवीन अवस्थी जी, मेजर सर, राम राम साहब फ्रॉम जयपुर, राम राम हुकुम, राम राम। We expected that internal external forces will use bad press and attacks to bring out the worst in India to influence the elections. If this is the best they can do, I'd say we are doing quite okay. Absolutely नवीन जी, आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं कि ये लोग पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं, बट ये कर नहीं। देखिए ना, बात ये है कि वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट में ये आर्टिकल आ गया, कितने लोग पढ़ते हैं वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट? 99% पता ही नहीं वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट होती, नोबडी इज इंटरेस्टेड। ये खुद अपना देखिए, ये एक लेफ्ट का एक इकोसिस्टम है और उस लेफ्ट के इकोसिस्टम में गोल गोल चीजें घूमती रहती हैं। इट्स जस्ट लाइक दैट, इसका कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता। इंडियन इलेक्शन में नियरली 1 बिलियन पीपल आर वोटिंग, लगभग 1 अरब लोग वोट करेंगे। तो ये दुनिया के इतिहास में सबसे बड़ा इलेक्शन है जो इस बार का है, जो भारत में हो रहा है, किसी भी देश में दुनिया में सबसे बड़ा इलेक्शन हो रहा है। उसमें क्या फर्क पड़ता है किसी गोरे ने क्या लिखा, कुछ करने की कोशिश करी? आई डोंट थिंक इट मेक्स इवन अ स्क्रैच, फॉरगेट अ डेंट। अच्छा, चरण और जय हिंद सर, जय श्री राम जी। वी शुड नॉट प्ले क्रिकेट विद पाक, बिल्कुल ठीक है, आई एग्री विथ यू। अ ब्रोकन एंड वीक पाकिस्तान इज इन इंडियाज इंटरेस्ट, मेजर पाक हैज लार्जेस्ट गैस रिसोर्स ऑन अर्थ, जंगली सुअर चौधरी फवाद एंड शेख रशीद। हाँ, बिल्कुल ठीक बात है। मैं तो कह रहा हूं कि शेख रशीद के मुंह में पाइप लगा दो तो इतना गैस वही पैदा कर देगा ना। मैं मुंह में पाइप लगा दूं इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ, फैमिली चैनल है ये, वरना शेख रशीद इतनी गैस पैदा करता है कि भाई पूरे पाकिस्तान के चूल्हे जला दे अगला एक बंदा। शेख रशीद में इतना पावर है। ठीक है, सेड दवे, मेजर साहब यू आर अ नेशनल, स्पेशली द कॉमेडी टच यू गिव टू थिंग्स, मेनी के रेडिकल्स हैव OCIs, व्हाई नॉट बैंड फ्रॉम इंडिया? बिल्कुल होना चाहिए। आई थैंक यू फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सिड दवे जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। अब यार ये यू सी, अब इनके पास ओसीआई है, अब ये ओसीआई लेकर आएंगे इंडिया में तभी तो अरेस्ट होंगे यहां पे। मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि दिस कुड बी वन ऑफ द थिंग्स, बट आई डोंट नो, आई डोंट नो। मुझे तो ये लगता है कि इसको क्या अरेस्ट फरेस्ट क्या, इनको बैन ही कर दो इंडिया से, क्या ना, वहीं पे जियो, वहीं पे मरो, वहीं पे खुश रहो, वापस वतन आने की जरूरत नहीं है, काट दो इनको बिल्कुल। ये जो चाहे कश्मीर के हो चाहे खालिस्तानी हो, कहीं के भी जो भी रेडिकल्स हैं, जो भी एंटी इंडिया है, उनको इंडिया से बिल्कुल बैन कर दो। यू शुड हैव अ क्लीन कट दिस थिंग। कृष्णन जी कहते हैं कि वड़ा पाव नाम लेके आपने मुंबई किया।
Assassination of Mr. Hardeep Singh Nijjar has shaken communities across this country. I can recall the fear and anxiety in the days that followed. Fears and anxieties which for many of our constituents has not yet gone away. With that in mind, along with the help of my caucus colleagues, I got working on M112, which I introduced on February 13th, 2024, to ensure that diaspora communities in Canada are protected from the acts of political interference, violence, and intimidation. Our government must review its measures that hold to account any person or agents of a foreign state undermining our democratic institutions, engaging in acts of violence, or violating human rights or international rights in order to bar these persons from entering Canada. I know that...
Confirm if the three who are accused in the Nijjar killing were on student visas here in Canada?
I can't.
You cannot?
I can't. There's information I just can't share with you at this time. This is an ongoing police investigation, and those questions reside properly with the RCMP or Minister LeBlanc.
Generally speaking, if someone were on a student visa, would there be criminal record checks?
Yes.
There would be?
Yeah.
And then how does that process work?
You check them, and if they have a criminal record, they don't come in.
Okay. And then, okay.
Do those reports concern you, though?
I can't, obviously, they do, yes. But again, I can't speak to specifics, Olivia.
So you can't confirm or deny if they're on student visas?
No.
And you can't confirm or deny if they were still active or...
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take a reaction to the fact that India's foreign minister responded to these arrests by saying they just show that Canada has been lax about who it lets into the country. What do you think of that response? How do you respond?
We're not lax, and the Indian foreign minister is entitled to his opinion.
What do you plan to do about this?
About what the Indian foreign minister said? I'm going to let him speak his mind. It's just not accurate.
And what about these reports? Is there anything the government's going to do to respond to this? I know you say you can't comment because it's
I can't.
Hershey speak, but like anything, is there anything at all that the government's going to do?
We
about
take any
this?
report like this very seriously.
Are you involved in, is your office involved in the investigation at all, providing information to RCMP?
We always cooperate with the RCMP.
Have you been asked to cooperate in this case?
We're always asked to cooperate, can't speak to specifics.
Okay.
Thanks.
The foreigners having, if I can call it, evil eye on the territorial integrity of India, that is a big red line for us. Indians will decide what will happen to India. Indians will decide the fate of India, not the foreigners.
Canada's position has always been clear. Our job is to protect Canadians, and we stand by the allegations that a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil by Indian agents. Now, the investigation by the RCMP is being done.
I need to begin, somewhat awkwardly perhaps, but importantly, to acknowledge the arrests that were made in relation to the murder of Mr. Nijjar. As the RCMP stated, the investigation remains ongoing, as does a separate and distinct investigation not limited to the involvement of the three people arrested yesterday. Hier, il y a eu des arrestations reliées au meurtre de M. Nijjar. Comme la GRC l'a dit, l'enquête suit son cours, tout comme une autre enquête distincte qui ne se limitera pas à l'implication des trois personnes arrêtées hier. This is important because Canada is a rule of law country with a strong and independent justice system, as well as a fundamental commitment to protecting all its citizens. I know that many Canadians, particularly members of the Sikh community, are feeling uneasy and perhaps even frightened right now. Well, every Canadian has the fundamental right to live safely and free from discrimination and threats of violence in Canada. Let us not allow events to change us. Let us remain calm. Let us remain steadfast in our commitment to our democratic principles and our system of justice. This is who we are and what we do as Canadians.
Today we have about 427,000 Indian international students in Canada, contributing close to $18 billion to the Canadian economy. Now, when these students come from India, many of them come from poor family. Their parents would sell their lands and farm and animals for them to come here. And when they are duped by unethical outlets, I am not calling them universities or colleges, educational outlets, that creates quite a sensation in India. There was a time when we were sending one body bag of an Indian international student every 10 days. And as an ambassador, you can imagine what I would feel in my heart. So, Brand Canada got a bad name in education. So what you said, what should be done? Brand Canada needs to reinstate its position that it used to have, for which stories need to be told. I had been telling Indian international students who have stayed here for a year or 2 years to go on the social media, talk about the struggles that they had, but also talk about how did they overcome those struggles. If I'm coming from different culture, I will have struggles. And that is not a news. News is that how did you overcome those struggles? So those videos are doing rounds on various social media, largely on, I shouldn't name a company, so on the social media. And many of the Indian parents have learned from that. Lastly, if such information is shared in the Indian local languages, I was just talking to the gentleman next to me, there are 22 official languages. So if they are shared in India, in Punjabi, in Tamil, in Malayalam, in Gujarati, in Hindi, then what happens is that parents who are sending their students, who have got the key say whether the student comes to Canada or not, are also able to understand what lies ahead.
Thank you very much, Excellency Verma. I hope the crowd actually caught the number that he mentioned. India exists with 22 different languages with different scripts, not just 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me start with negative, because positives are much more as compared to negatives, so I'll come to the positives later. Negative part is what is being played out today, and all of you are well aware of the stories which are covered by media, which is a bit colored, but nevertheless, there would be some facts in that. The larger question from the perspective of a foreign affairs enthusiast would be the origin of what's happening today and what you read so much politically. The origin is the lack of understanding of India's concerns. When we call 2 countries in bilateral relations as partners, strategic partners, friends, we expect both the countries to understand each other's perspectives, each other's concerns, respect the cultural diversity of each other. Unfortunately, there had been issues, and this is nothing new, decades-old issues, which have resurfaced, re-emerged, and there had been unfortunate crimes wherein those who are currently Canadian citizens, largely having their origin in India. India does not have dual nationality. So therefore, if someone becomes a Canadian citizen or citizen of any other country, he or she is no longer an Indian citizen. So for us, technically, the person is a foreigner. So the foreigners having, if I can call it, evil eye on the territorial integrity of India, that is a big red line for us. Indians will decide what will happen to India. Indians will decide the fate of India, not the foreigners. If those people who are Indians living abroad want to decide the fate of India, better to go back and participate in the election process. Every 5 years, India goes through an election process at the national level, almost every 5 years. And similarly, the states, which are provinces, as we call here, in India also go through similar exercises. All the issues which are of interest to Indians are being put to vote. So therefore, that is the reason, that is the origin why you are seeing some of the coverage that you see today. But let me assure you that there is a lot of noise beyond what is being done. A lot of discussions at the government level, both sides, is happening. And through the diplomatic channels, these channels are not open to public. And these diplomatic channels are trying to find solutions and resolutions to the issues of concern on both sides. And the way in which it is moving, I think it will come to both sides to see the virtue of resolving the issues, satisfying the concerns of both sides. As far as I'm concerned, my concern is national security, threats emanating from the land of Canada. These threats are largely emanating from the Canadian citizens. So these two are my red lines. We are ready to sit down on the table any day, and we are doing that, and we are trying to resolve this issue. So that was the negative side, which I wanted to tell you. So very small, out of 30 minutes, I think 3 minutes on negative. There are so many positive things which are happening.
Thank you very much for...
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It is an honor to be here today. We celebrate the great values of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the 10th Guru of Sikhism, who brought home the Khalsa, a Khalsa that taught purity, honesty, and freedom. A Khalsa that celebrates the harvest, where you bring home the fruits of your labor. A Khalsa that calls on all to give selflessly through seva. And boy, do you ever need to give selflessly these days, because there is so much suffering today in Canada. Everything is broken. Doubled over the last 9 terrible years. Crime, chaos, drugs and disorder, extortions, car thefts, and even assassinations without any criminal charges going ahead whatsoever. People have never felt so endangered as they do now after 9 years. But the good news is life was not like this before, and it won't be like this after. We will rely on the great Sikh values that Guru Gobind Singh brought forward, values of equality for the common people. The Guru said that there should be no caste system, no people on the top dictating down and pushing the people down. Everyone would be Singh, a lion that is strong enough to bring home for his family. That is the country we're going to bring home again by fighting to bring a direct flight to Amritsar, something the current government has failed to do after 9 long years. Direct flights already exist from Singapore, Malaysia, Italy, Uzbekistan, UK, and countless other countries. We need a direct flight to Amritsar, and we need a national blue seal so that professionals that come here from Punjab or anywhere else can take a test, prove they're qualified, and work as nurses, doctors, and other highly paid professionals. Bole so nihal. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
ਗੁਰੂ ਪਿਆਰੀ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਆਓ ਗੱਜ ਕੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਪ੍ਰਵਾਨ ਕਰੋ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਸਾਜਨਾ ਦਿਵਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਵਧਾਈਆਂ ਹੋਣ, ਵਿਸਾਖੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਵਧਾਈਆਂ ਹੋਣ। ਬੜੇ ਮਾਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਲੇ ਵਾਲੇ ਦੇਖੋ, ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਵੱਡੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਾ ਦੇ ਇਕੱਠ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਸਾਜਨਾ ਦਿਵਸ ਮਨਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਾਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਕਾਰੇ ਗੂੰਜ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਆਪਣਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਨ, ਬਹੁਤ ਮਾਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ। ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੋ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਦਾ ਮਕਸਦ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਖੋਜ ਕਰੀਏ, ਖਾਲਸਾ ਬਣਿਆ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਬੇਇਨਸਾਫੀ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਲੜਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਲੜਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਬਣਿਆ, ਇਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਹੋਵੇ। ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੇਇਨਸਾਫੀ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਮਨੁੱਖੀ ਅਧਿਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਉਲੰਘਣਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੋਢੇ ਖੜੇ ਹੋਈਏ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਸੰਗਤ ਨੂੰ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੋ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ 40ਵਾਂ ਵਰ੍ਹੇਗੰਢ ਹੋਣ ਚੱਲੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਣੇ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਨਸਲਕੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੋਇਆ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਰੈਕਗਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਵਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਬੇਇਨਸਾਫੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਕਦਮ ਹੈ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਬੇਨਤੀ ਹੈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਜੋ ਪਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਆਪਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਮ-ਹੁਮਾ ਕੇ ਦਸਤਖਤ ਕਰੋ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰੋ। ਆਪਾਂ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਭੇਜਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਤੱਕ ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਆ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਦੇਸ਼ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਜੈਨੋਸਾਈਡ ਰੈਕਗਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ। ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਆ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਕੌਮ ਦੀ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜੋ ਬੇਇਨਸਾਫੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਰੈਕਗਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਵਾਲੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰੀਏ। ਆਪਾਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦਾ ਜੋ ਮਨੁੱਖੀ ਅਧਿਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਉਲੰਘਣਾ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਗੀ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਸਹਿਯੋਗ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਇੰਨੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਨਾਲ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੁਛ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਆਈਡੀਆਜ਼ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ, ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੇਰ ਫਤਿਹ ਦੀ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਓ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਜਿੱਥੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਹਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਕੀਤਾ, ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਭਾਈ ਗੁਰਤੇਜ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ US ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ, ਉਹ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਫੇਲ ਹੋਈ। ਉਸ ਕੇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਫਿਰ 3-4 ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਆਗੂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਲਿਸਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਦੱਸੇ ਗਏ। ਸਾਡਾ ਰਿਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਤਿੰਨਾਂ ਜਾਣਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਤਾਂ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦੀ ਫੋਕਸ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਤੇ ਰਹੇ, ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਫੋਕਸ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਤੇ ਰਹੇ। ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ 3 ਬੰਦੇ ਭੇਜੇ ਆ, ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ 3 ਹੋਰ ਭੇਜ ਦੇਣ ਤੇ ਪਰਸੋਂ 3 ਹੋਰ ਭੇਜ ਦੇਣ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੁੱਕਣੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਓਪਨਿੰਗ ਰਿਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ 3 ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪੇਸ਼ੀ ਹੋਈ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਡੇਟਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਅਗਾਮ ਮਈ 21 ਇਸੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਕੋਰਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 9:30 ਵਜੇ ਰੱਖੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ। ਤੇ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਿੱਖ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਖੜੀਆਂ ਹੈ, ਵੱਡੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਾਜੀ ਹਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਿਖਾਉਂਦੇ, ਨਾਲ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਦੇ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਨਾਲ ਡਟ ਕੇ ਖੜਨਾ ਤੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਆ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਨਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਕ ਡਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋਣ ਦੇਣਾ ਸੰਗਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇਹ ਸੰਗਤ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੀ ਰਹੇ, ਭਾਜੀ ਹਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੀ ਰਹੇ ਤੇ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੀ ਰਹੇ।
ਜਸਟਿਸ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ
ਉਮੀਦ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ 3 ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਫੜੇ ਗਏ ਆ ਕਿ 3 ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਚੱਲੇ, ਕਨਵਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਸੈਂਟੈਂਸਿੰਗ ਸਹੀ ਹੋਵੇ। ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਇਸ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦਾ ਰੋਲ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੱਕ ਹੋਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਕੇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ 3 ਵਿਅਕਤੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਭੇਜਿਆ ਹੈ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਹੈ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਬਣਾਈ ਹੈ, ਕਿਸੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰਿਪਰੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਵੱਡਾ ਖੁਲਾਸਾ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ US ਹੋਵੇ, ਕਿ ਉਸ ਗੱਲ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ। ਸੋ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਤੋਂ ਸਿਰਫ 3 ਵਿਅਕਤੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਨਾਲ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਕਾਊਂਟੇਬਲ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਹੈ।
ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ 3 ਅਕਿਊਜ਼ਡ ਇਹ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੀਜਰ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਦੀ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਆ ਰਹੇ, ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ, ਪਾਵਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ। ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਿਸਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਬੱਚੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ, ਆਪਣੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਦੀ ਉਹ ਸੇਵਾ ਸੰਭਾਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਰੂਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ। ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹਾਰਡ ਵਰਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਅਕਤੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਪਛਾਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਅਪਰਾਧੀ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਗੁਨੇਗਾਰ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਜ਼ਾ ਪੂਰੀ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ।
ਸਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਕੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ
ਅੱਜ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤਿੰਨੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਤਲ ਫੜੇ ਗਏ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ, ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਮੈਨੇਜਮੈਂਟ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਰਾਹਤ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਨਿਆਂ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੜਿਆ। ਪਰ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਅਪੀਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਹਾਈ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੌਂਸਲ ਜਨਰਲ ਆ ਸੰਜੇ ਵਰਮਾ ਤੇ ਮਨੀਸ਼ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਚਾਰਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੇਸ ਆ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਜੜ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਆ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਦਾ ਕੌਂਸਲ ਜਨਰਲ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਾਈ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਆ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਜਗਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੁੱਛਤ ਪਤਾਈ ਉਹੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਚਾਰਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਅਤੇ ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਹਿਣੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਨਿੱਜਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੱਖਰਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਰਾਜ ਆ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ।
Canada has informed us about the arrest.
We can say that Canada has informed
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
What happens is in consulates in different countries, there are different norms. In certain countries, if a person, say a national of a particular country, if he has been apprehended, then it is for that national to make a request that please give consular access to my embassy, and thereafter it is granted. Beyond that, we don't have any information. As I told you, that we have been informed that 3 people have been arrested and they happen to be Indian national. That is what we have been told. Siddhant, your question was regarding whether any evidence has been shared with us. So let me first make it clear that no specific or relevant evidence or information has been shared by the Canadian authorities in regard to this particular matter till date with us. You will therefore understand our view that the matter is being prejudged when people say X or Y. Obviously, there are political interests at work. We have long maintained that separatists, extremists, and those advocating violence have been given political space in Canada. Our diplomats have been threatened with impunity and obstructed in their performance of duties. We've also pointed out to the Canadian authorities that figures associated with organized crime with links in India have been allowed entry and residency. Many of our extradition requests are pending with them. We are having discussions at the diplomatic level on all these matters with the Canadian side.
Just like you, I would like to talk about India. There was a foreign affairs minister who said Canada was hosting criminals. There's the High Commissioner right now in Montreal that is still insisting on the negative relationship with Canada. To what extent is this tarnishing our relationship with India? What is happening now? Do you fear any reprisals? Answer: I cannot comment on what the High Commissioner is now saying because I'm not there, and it's not appropriate to comment on comments I've not read. But generally speaking, I can say something. First of all, our priority as a government is to protect the rights and freedoms of all Canadians, to protect personal safety, to protect the right to free expression, and of course, without any crimes being committed. And that's the right of every Canadian. And that's the priority for this government. We are taking seriously all comments, perspectives from our international counterparts. And we will always follow up. But let me repeat, for us, the priority is that everyone here in Canada, every Canadian has the right to be personally safe, and they have the right to free expression. And those are rights that our government will always defend. Question: do you have the impression that the relationship between India and the Canadian government is kind of frozen? Answer: I believe that it's absolutely correct and understandable for a democratic country to say, we will protect our citizens, we will protect free expression for our citizens, we will protect personal safety, the personal safety of our citizens. Of course, it is not allowed to commit any crimes in our country, and we will always follow up if there are any allegations. I trust our police services. I have full trust in our police services. But I find the position very understandable that when it comes to our international relationships, I can say that we're a democracy, and every Canadian, everyone who lives here has democratic rights, and as a government, it is our obligation to protect them.
We're all here. We were able to listen in as the investigators told us what was happening and transpiring with the arrests being made. So shortly before the media news started breaking, we were made aware that this was happening. The reaction from the family, again, at a personal and emotional level, is very emotional, and they're very kind of like I think still waiting for like finality of this issue, because right now what we've got is charges laid. There's still a trial to be run. There's still convictions. There's still sentencing. So they understand it's going to be a longer process. But at the moment, there is a bit of a sigh of relief in their father's murder and their husband's murder, and for their elderly parents, their son's murder. So there is a bit of a sigh of relief there.
And how many other suspects were there that day and were involved in the killing? Do you believe?
We heard it was a much larger operation, up to at least 6 to 8 individuals on site. And then the planning and the conspiracy could have been a lot more. So these 3 individuals is like, for us, like a huge start. Where further kind of arrests and further investigation down the road may lead to that. We're not sure. But we believe it was a much larger operation than just a couple of individuals showing up to do this. Obviously, the tying back to India, India's involvement is right there from the Prime Minister's revelations and also through the U.S. indictment. So I think it's a much larger operation on the ground, more than half a dozen people for sure, to carry it out.
What do you make of them staying in Edmonton despite, colleagues like mine saying that, arrests are imminent? What do you make of kind of them allegedly coming here, driving back, and staying all these months when they knew that they were in the target?
I think for 4 or 5 months we've been hearing that something was potentially coming, and I think we were all kind of waiting, and after 4 or 5 months you start thinking, well, maybe not. And these individuals, it's very brazen to kind of stick around. It also may have to do with the investigation itself, how closely they were being watched, any travel restrictions, their ability to get out of the country. We're not aware of any of those details, but the investigation led to the arrest, so we have to believe that the investigators took full precautions to ensure that these individuals, the case against them was foolproof to a degree before they laid charges. So while in December, when we heard that there was something imminently coming, hopes were high. And I think after a couple of months, there was a bit of dismay. So this day is bringing a bit of that relief as well, that something has happened.
And yet there's still many more out there, you believe. What about the duty to warn? You're very familiar with them. How many do you think they may be involved with? Do you think perhaps the Indian government has multiple groups, or do you think this was one main group that is responsible for those other duties to warn?
I think we can't really comment on just more speculation, but what we do believe is we've got a motive and a policy to eliminate Sikh activists. That was very clear in the U.S. indictment. where they were going after Mr. Pannu in the US, Mr. Nijjar here, 3 or 4 others. We have a long list. That's what Nikhil Gupta, the individual that's been arrested in the Czech Republic, is saying. So when we hear things like that, the Indian government, they could send operatives like this here potentially, if that's what's happened. They could source this out to local gangs here. They could source it out to local hitmen. I think it doesn't really matter to us in that sense. What matters is that India has a policy to eliminate Sikh voices, and they will do so whether they do it through sending people from India here under some type of guise, or they'll contract local people here to carry that out. And that's the concerning piece around like public safety, is that there are people out here that have duties to warn. There are people out here that are at risk, and they have to kind of wonder as to like what will Canada do at a federal level. So arresting the shooters is one thing. Arresting those that sent the shooters or taking action against them is the kind of the root of the issue here. And to us, that's India, that's their consulates, that's their high commission, and what's been there. And we know that 40 years of history shows that Indian operatives under the guise of diplomatic cover come through these consulates in positions, and then they are expelled from this country as well. So there's a long history here that actually shows their involvement. The unfortunate thing is that it took the murder and assassination of a Sikh leader on at a place of worship to actually bring that out to this point.
Is there any press conference coming from BC Gurdwara Council later today?
We're still kind of considering that. We're leaving it up to Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara and the family to kind of lead on that as to what they would like to see. We don't want to overstep. We want to make sure that they are comfortable with everything that's happening. At this time, there's nothing that's been scheduled, but if it is, there will be kind of a call out to all media if they're interested in attending.
On June 18th, after the assassination, we stood outside the Gurdwara side and said this is a political assassination, and I believe that the Indian government's involved in it. Now the insurance has come out. How does that make you feel today?
I think it's not just me. I think for 40 years the community's been talking about foreign interference of India. So I was just saying what the community was feeling. Like I'm no one to kind of speak on behalf of the whole community, but in that moment, what we saw and what happened to Hardeep in that parking lot of a place of worship, it was very clear that this was a political assassination. There was no other reason that anybody would want to harm an individual like Hardeep. It was his views for the Sikh community, its sovereignty, for the Khalistan movement, for the political prisoners that are languishing in jail for the last 30 years, the mass atrocities and human rights violations and genocide committed by India against the Sikh people. For us, it was very crystal clear that a guy that's speaking out at such a high level and connecting so many people to this movement over the last 10 years, that India had to go to this desperate step of eliminating him physically. So I think it's a bit of validation and vindication for the whole community in that sense.
How has Mr. Pannu reacted to this news?
I haven't spoken to Mr. Pannu, but him being a lawyer, him being a Sikh activist and Sikh leader, I can only imagine that he's seeing some relief in the community with this news. I think him and his life still being in danger. I think he's still got to take precautions and operate the way he does. And I think he would comment himself. I think if anybody would reach out to him as to what is transpiring here. But I think from a community perspective, while there's a sigh of relief, there's a much bigger interest in holding India accountable at an international level for what they're doing.
Your foreign affairs counterpart in India has said that they just show how lax Canada is on who it lets into the country. What do you think about that statement?
Canada's position has always been clear. Our job is to protect Canadians, and we stand by the allegations that a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil by Indian agents. Now, the investigation by the RCMP is being done. I won't further comment, and no other officials from our government will further comment. What I'm telling, though, on the question of the relationship with India is I think that it's always better when diplomacy remains in private, and Canada will continue to stand by first protecting Canadians, making sure that we also protect our sovereignty, and in the end, also, we need to protect our rule of law.
I need to begin, somewhat awkwardly perhaps, but importantly, to acknowledge the arrests that were made in relation to the murder of Mr. Nijjar. As the RCMP stated, the investigation remains ongoing, as does a separate and distinct investigation not limited to the involvement of the 3 people arrested yesterday. Hier, il y a eu des arrestations reliées au meurtre de M. Nijjar. Comme la GRC l'a dit, l'enquête suit son cours, tout comme une autre enquête distincte qui ne se limitera pas à l'implication des 3 personnes arrêtées hier. This is important because Canada is a rule of law country with a strong and independent justice system, as well as a fundamental commitment to protecting all its citizens. I know that many Canadians, particularly members of the Sikh community, are feeling uneasy and perhaps even frightened right now. Well, every Canadian has the fundamental right to live safely and free from discrimination and threats of violence in Canada. Let us not allow events to change us. Let us remain calm. Let us remain steadfast in our commitment to our democratic principles and our system of justice. This is who we are and what we do as Canadians.
The investigation by the RCMP is being done. I won't further comment, and no other officials from our government will further comment. What I'm telling, though, on the question of the relationship with India is I think that it's always better when diplomacy remains in private, and Canada will continue to stand by first protecting Canadians, making sure that we also protect our sovereignty, and in the end, also, we need to protect our rule of law.